welcome to Perfect Beer Talks. This is the fifth episode. Till now, we have valuable sessions with someone from ABI, Malson Coors, and Forbes America to UK. Today, I'm very excited. We have a very unique guest. For me, if you want to define to uniqueness, I can say that something very limited. And today we will talk with a guy who is only 20 in the world. We will talk Master Cicerone Neil. So Neil, you are more than welcome. Thanks for your time today. I hope we will have a great session. I know it's difficult to describe you. Could you please introduce yourself to us?
All right. Well, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it quite a bit. Hello to everybody out there. My name is Neil Witte. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. We are right in the middle of the United States. I do a number of different things. I work in the beer business. I've been in the beer business for over 25 years. I got in as a brewer many years ago. And one of my first jobs was as a brewer at a brewery here in Kansas City called Boulevard Brewing Company. You may be familiar with them. They're pretty sizable regional brewery. I was a brewer for them for about 3 years, and then I moved into a different role where I was doing field quality. So I was taking care of the beer outside the brewery in the marketplace. So I was working with our sales team, working with our retailers and our distributors out in the marketplace to make sure that our beer was being taken care of. And so I did that for the next 16 years. And I was responsible for education and training as well. So after 19 years at Boulevard, I left and started my own business. That was about 5 years ago now. And then I also work with the Cicerone certification program. And I do private training for them, and I help manage exams. And then I have a new business that I created a couple of years ago called TapStar. TapStar is a draft beer quality certification program for bars and restaurants and for brewery tap rooms. So we make sure that draft beer quality is at its best at retail, and we certify accounts that are doing all of the right things, that have fresh beer, that have clean lines and clean glassware and well-designed draft systems. I'm a Master Cicerone, so I've passed the highest level of Cicerone examinations. That was back in 2012. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
There is much to unpack. I'm very curious about especially the certification program, TapStar, but we will come on that point. As a 23-year beer industry veteran and draft beer specialist, I want to start with, how did you decide the part of the beer industry, especially after studying German and philosophy? What is the relation between Goethe, Bertolt Brecht, and draft beer?
Yeah, I studied philosophy in college. I got a degree in philosophy and a degree in German. And so, naturally I went into the beer business. I think I studied what I liked to study in college, and that didn't necessarily set me up for a direct career path. But I think if you talk to a lot of people in the beer business, a lot of them have backgrounds that are not at all related to beer whatsoever. I graduated college and was bartending and was home brewing, and this was in the early 90s. And I traveled a little bit overseas and drank some really great beers that I wasn't able to get back here in the States at the time. And so I was making my own beer and got into it and decided that I wanted to get into the beer business. And so I just kind of worked my way into the beer business. And that's kind of how it happened.
Our stories have some similarities. Also, I studied civil engineering in Buffalo. I went there. I thought it's New York, but it wasn't New York.
Yeah, technically, yes.
Technically, yes. Sophistically, not. Then I jump into this business, drop out the college, and I have one failed startup story, then founded Pubinno. In Pubinno, we pivoted our products, and finally, with the Smart Tap and Intent of Beer, we are disrupting the world. One thing was very interesting in your speech. You said that in 90s you were interested in home brewing. In that time, home brewing was usual in US.
There were, home brewing was, I wouldn't say it was really popular. I was the only person I knew who was making beer at home. Although we did have a homebrew supply shop. So I know there are other people who were making beer. It was just something that I wanted to get into. So I, bought a homebrew kit and started making beer at home. And then I started, teaching my friends how to do it. And, I felt like I got pretty good at it, but, I'm sure if I tasted some of those beers now, I would probably feel a little differently about it. But that's kind of what got me into beer.
Neil, I want to ask you, how was your journey? Which levels you passed, and what were the most challenging parts till reaching the Master Cicerone, being Master Cicerone? Could you a little bit tell us more, please?
Well, sure. So the Cicerone program was started in 2007. And in 2007, Ray Daniels, the guy who started the program, he started the first level of examination that was the Certified Beer Server exam. That's an online exam. And then level 2, the very first level 2 exam, the Certified Cicerone exam, was in April of 2008 at the San Diego Craft Brewers Conference. And a few months before that, I had read something about it. And at the time I was working for Boulevard Brewing Company as the field quality manager. And I was, seeing a lot of really awful things at retail, a lot of beer being mishandled and dirty draft lines and things like that. And that was a lot of what I was dealing with on a daily basis. And I felt like the Cicerone program, even though it was brand new and nobody really knew anything about it, I felt like it was something that the industry needed. So I went ahead and dove in really early on. So I took the Certified Beer Server exam, and then I signed up for the first Certified Cicerone exam. And so I passed the Certified Cicerone exam. I was one of, I think, the first 4 or 5 people to pass that exam. And and then the next year they offered the Master Cicerone exam. So at that time, there were only 3 levels of examination. The Advanced Cicerone wasn't introduced until, probably, I don't know off the top of my head exactly. I can't remember. I think it was like 6 years ago, maybe. And so I took the Master Cicerone and failed it. And so it took me ultimately 3 tries to pass that exam because it's very difficult. Me and my employer, Boulevard, supporting a new program that we felt like the industry needed at the time. It's grown and developed quite a bit over the years, and now it's a pretty recognizable certification in the United States and around the world. So, it's been really great to see it grow and develop like that. Because it's, I think we've provided a lot of some good quantifiable goals for beer professionals to set for themselves so they can learn more about beer. And it provides a level of validation, and and it's helped a lot of people get into certain positions and certain jobs in the industry, so they can show that, hey, I know X amount of beer or X amount about beer, and so it's a way of demonstrating a certain level of knowledge. So it's been good to be a part of.
Neil, you make it sound easy, but you have to be over top of the pass everything. We are talking about one of 20 people in 7 billion world. So
yeah, well, 7 billion people didn't take the exam, so to be fair.
So it's a great example for us also. I have some notes, but if Volkan, our creative director, allow me, I want to jump into directly to draft beer. Neil,
Yeah.
could you tell us a little bit history of draft beer? I mean, especially before the cooling systems. I'm asking for the audience. Before the cooling systems, is there any draft? If there is, what is the relation between draft and steel kegs? Before steel kegs, what people used to do? Could you tell about the history of draft?
Well, I'm not a historian, but before we had steel kegs or metal kegs, it was wooden kegs, and wood has been used for packaging beer and transporting beer and serving beer for a very long time, as long as barrels have been around, really. And that's what the original draft beer was. It was a way of storing beer and serving beer. I mean, I think one of the closer relatives to what draft beer probably used to be is if you go to England or Scotland in the UK and you drink cask ale and you see beer served from cask. That's probably about as close as you get to what draft beer likely was before the advent of the stainless steel keg or the metal keg.
Neil, can we say that cask ales were the first drafts in the history?
I don't know how much modern cask resembles what draft beer in general looked like, but it probably was fairly similar in that, beer probably was finished in that container that it was served from. In other words, it probably went through a regular fermentation in the brewery, and then it was packaged into the barrel, where it probably underwent either further fermentation or a second fermentation, which helped to carbonate it to a certain degree, and then they served it out of that same vessel. I think modern cask, there's a lot that goes into making sure that the beer settles out properly, so the beer is clear and that it reaches a certain level of carbonation. And there's some very specialized equipment that fits onto the cask itself, that I would imagine, was not an essential part of these barrel beers, these barrel packaged beers back in the day. But I'm kind of speculating at this point. So but I think it's not hard to imagine what draft beer was like before stainless steel. I mean, these serving beer from the larger packages they had back then, wooden barrels.
It's also very limited resources about it to read. It's very limited resources.
Yeah, you can find some stuff out there, but yeah, there's not a whole lot out there, not a whole lot of resources on the history of
maybe
draft.
One day we can make something together.
Hey, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, why not history?
Hey, why not?
So what I understand from your words, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Cooling systems, I mean, especially for lagers, is a key milestone for the draft beer.
Well, yeah, I would say refrigeration in general was a pretty important development for beer in general, for storage, preservation, transportation, being able to ship beer longer distances, and it's been obviously very helpful for dispensing too. So if you want to, it now allows us to push beer long distances and keep the beer cold the whole time, which is a pretty important thing, because not only is it important because people want to drink cold beer, but keeping beer cold also helps you to preserve the carbonation in the beer, because as beer warms up, the gas wants to break out and it gets foamy, and the carbonation level changes. So that it's the development of refrigeration, yeah, has been pretty key in draft beer and in beer in general.
What kind of techniques do you use while testing beer, and how should we test beer to understand whether it's a good draft beer or not? By the way, cheers, Neil.
Cheers. It's a little earlier here. I don't have a beer with me.
It's a great couple, beer and coffee.
Yeah, you'll have to drink a beer for me. It's still the morning here. First and foremost, you want a draft beer that just tastes good. And not everybody who is drinking draft beer is going to be analyzing it in the way that I would. But there are, the things that I look for are some of the most common things that can go wrong with beer on draft. For one, I'm looking for beer that's fresh. And that's the case whether it's in a package or on draft. Fresh beer is just simply going to taste better. We want to drink beer fresh. If it's not fresh, it could develop a whole host of flavors that we don't want. It could develop kind of sherry-like or honey-like characteristics that you don't want. It can make the beer seem a little sweeter. And you can also develop flavors that taste kind of like wet paper or wet cardboard. And nobody really likes that. The other thing I'm looking for is the draft system clean, because stuff grows in draft lines, and draft systems have, there's bacteria and yeast that grow in draft lines, and it needs to be cleaned out periodically. And if it's not, those microorganisms can affect the flavor of the beer, and they can ruin the flavor of the beer. And so some of the more common flavors that you would get from dirty draft lines would be if your beer tastes like butter or butterscotch, or if your beer is tasting sour, and it's not supposed to be a sour beer. So those are a couple of common flavors that I would look for as well. Sometimes older draft lines can make your beer seem kind of musty or kind of cellar-like, kind of unpleasant. So that's something I'm looking for too. I also pay a lot of attention to the glass that it's being served in. So you want to have a clean glassware. And, the telltale sign of a dirty glass is if you get a freshly poured beer and there's bubbles stuck to the inside of the glass. That means that there's something on the inside of the glass that the bubbles are sticking to. Bubbles don't stick to glass, they stick to stuff that's on glass. So those are a few things that I'm looking for. And I would say the other thing is I'm looking to make sure that the beer is carbonated. Sometimes systems are designed in a way that it allows the beer to go flat in the keg. It's a pretty common problem. Sometimes systems are set up in a way where it overcarbonates the beer, and it makes the beer really fizzy and foamy at the tap, and so overly effervescent. So you want to make sure, that's another thing I'm looking for is proper carbonation. Now, the average person drinking beer might not notice all of those things and be parsing them out, and we don't expect them to. I don't expect everybody to be focusing in on all those details. I just want the person who's going to drink a beer at a bar to drink it and be like, yeah, I like it. And all those things that I mentioned are all kind of part of the average person saying, yeah, I like it or I don't like it. Because if somebody gets like a flat beer at a bar that maybe just doesn't taste as fresh, they might not pick those things out. But they might be like, this just doesn't taste as good as when I was here before. And so they maybe don't order another one, or they end up going somewhere else where they just remember that the beer tasted really good at this other place. So, it's really easy for a retailer to lose business because of bad draft beer, and they don't even know it. So yeah, those are some of the things that I'm typically looking for.
Thanks for your answer. When I heard from my team, our next guest on the Perfect Beer Talks is Neil, I say, oh my God, guys, we should collect the questions from all over the world. This should be a great source for the beer industry. So we have a chance to ask to beer masters in all around the world to ask you questions. Now, unfortunately, I will have a chance to limit it of them because of our time. Now,
Yeah.
I start with one of them. This lady is a really great brewing master, and she asks you that if you have a limitless resources, what do you do to serve perfect beer? What do you want to have on to serve perfect beer if you have a limitless resources?
So like what kind of like how am I going to serve it, or what beer?
How you gonna make it and serve it?
Limited resources. Well, a friend of mine says all the time, the best brewers use the best technology to make the best beer. And so, yeah, so if I had unlimited resources, I would be probably buying a really great kick-ass state-of-the-art brew house from one of the more established producers, like maybe a Krohn's or Steinecker. I'd probably have a lot of automated systems, a lot of manual systems mixed in with just enough control, use only the freshest ingredients. I would spare no expense on the packaging line to ensure that there's no oxygen in my packaged beer. I would have all the bells and whistles. So I would have the best system that a person could design. And of course, the best brewers make the best beer with the best technology.
Okay. Okay, second question comes from another brewmaster from Germany. Is the most impactful milestone in the all beer history, do you think?
Wow, that's a big question. There's probably a number of them in there. I mean, the one we mentioned before, I think, is a really big one: refrigeration. The ability to keep beer cold and keep it fresher longer. That was really impactful. I would say the development of steam power that allows breweries to to more effectively and use heat on their brew house. That's probably the development of steam and this, steam power and the steam engine in the 1700s. That was probably a pretty big development. I would say those are a couple of good ones. Daniel Wheeler's drum roaster for malting, that was a big step in the development of the ability to make dark malt and to develop different roasts of malt. So using indirect heat, taking the open flame out of the picture. That was probably another big development too. If I had to think of a few right off the top of my head, those would be some of the big ones.
I think it's a great examples. 100%, I agree with you. Okay, let's jump into the personal. Neil, how did you decide to found Craft Quality Solutions?
Well, so Craft Quality Solutions, that's my consulting and draft services business. That grew out of the work that I was doing at Boulevard Brewing Company. So I'd been working with draft beer for a long time. Through them, I had been installing draft systems on behalf of the brewery for retailers around the Midwest. I had been teaching classes and on draft beer service and installation for distributors. I'd been training distributor draft technicians and working with retailers, and so that just grew out of a desire for me to do that same kind of work, only for the broader community, not just for one particular brewery. And I'd been with Boulevard for a really long time, and it's a great company, and I still have a lot of friends that work there, and it was just time for me to move on and take that work and expand it, and that's what I did with Craft Quality Solutions.
It's an invaluable thing for our industry. I will jump into in detail more, but I would like to ask you, for example, what I know personally, VLB from Berlin, Weisstefana from Bavaria. Do you think which academies in the academic side, I ask, not a commercial side, academic side, are the most important players in beer know-how industry?
Well, so I don't have any formal training for brewing. I'll say that right off the bat. So I can't speak directly to one particular brewing university over another. Weinstefaner is obviously one of the most respected in the world. When you look at the United States, a couple come to mind that have been around for a very long time. Would be the Siebel Institute in Chicago, the University of California at Davis as well. Both have been educating brewers and sending them out into the business for many years. I think what's really been neat to see over the past several years as the beer industry has grown here in the United States and around the world is there are great university programs popping up all over that have brewing courses and brewing tracks and brewing science degrees. And there are a lot of them that are doing a really fantastic job. So, by picking out two of the oldest ones, it's by no means a slight against any of the other ones out there. There's some really fantastic education out there now, more than we've ever had. I don't want to say ever, but more than we've ever had in my lifetime or in recent memory. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to choose from now. So if somebody wants to get into the beer business, you can find brewing programs all over the place.
Neil, your words remind me of good memory. We have a chance to work with the Weisstefana on our Smart Clean product. Have you ever heard about that?
I've heard a little bit about it. Maybe you could tell us about it.
Smart Tap, and Smart Clean. We have 3 different products, and we built Internet of Beer. The general concept name is Internet of Beer. Smart Tap, as you know, the world first AI-powered beer tap. Smart Tap is a data platform where you can track the footprint of nightlife. And Smart Clean is the world first AI-powered self-cleaning device, actually. And in the Smart Clean, we work with the Weisstefana. Oh my God, it was so challenging. We got validation from them as a stamp, but it was challenging. So I know how they work detailedly and perfectly. So let's jump into the cleaning side. Neil, what do you think? How does beer line cleaning affect the taste of beer, and what is the ideal frequency of beer line cleaning?
There's a lot of things that can pop up with a draft system that you don't want in your beer. And a lot of the ones related to line cleaning are going to be flavors that come from some type of bacterial infection, more than likely. And the only way to remove that bacterial infection is through a chemical cleaning process. And so in the United States, we recommend cleaning draft lines every 2 weeks. That's a recommendation that was put forward by the Draft Quality Subcommittee of the Brewers Association. That's a group that I'm a part of, and we wrote the Draft Beer Quality Manual, which is essentially a technical guide for everything involving draft beer quality, from installation to service and operation. And it was written by a group of small brewers and big brewers alike. We put our heads together and came up with essentially recommendations from the American brewing industry. So the official recommendations in there that you clean draft lines every 2 weeks with a caustic solution, somewhere between 2 and 3%. And you use hot water, not super hot, but hot, but you can still kind of put your hand in it, not that hot. And you ideally are recirculating it with some type of pump system where you can recirculate the chemical through the system for 15 minutes minimum. Those are some of the basic recommendations that we have. Now, I know like in the UK, their official recommendations, the recommendations you see there are to clean draft lines every week. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that their draft systems run at a warmer temperature. So the United States draft systems, the average system temperature is about 38 degrees. And in the UK, there's a few beers that you'll see that are served at 38 degrees, but they call that ultra cold. And so that's extremely cold by their standards. So, cask ale can run all the way up into the low 50s. It's 53, 54 Fahrenheit is about what you see cask ale running. And then a lot of the other keg beer will run in the mid to upper 40s. So because it's warmer, you get more bacterial load and you get more biofilm development on the inside of the draft line. And so they recommend a more frequent line cleaning.
Yeah, I understand. What do you think? Nowadays, some companies are trying to no chemical cleanings. I mean, ozone. What do you think about that technique?
I don't have a lot of direct experience with ozone. I just had somebody asking me about this the other day. I'm not an expert in ozone. I know, I consulted with a few of my colleagues about this just the other day. And I know that ozone has the potential to potentially damage some of the neoprene gaskets and some of your rubber or neoprene parts in a system. Ozone can also be particularly dangerous in a confined space because it removes oxygen from the air. So there is a certain hazard involved in that. It has the ability to penetrate some biofilms, but I've not seen any, I don't have any direct experience with it. And I know that in some experiments, ozone doesn't really penetrate other biofilms as well as it penetrates some particular ones. And I know that the biofilm that you get in a draft line is a microbiological load, but it's also mixed in with a beer stone, mineral, and there's also hop resins and carbohydrates from malt. Mixture of stuff building up of the lines that I'm not convinced that ozone is going to be able to penetrate that. Somebody would have to show me evidence that it works before I would say, yeah, that works. And I haven't seen it. All right, bring it on.
As you probably know, I couldn't read this word, Reinheitsgebot, something like that. Let's say German beer purity law causes many discussions as the craft beer industry rises. The law indicates the only ingredients that could be used during brewery should be hops, barley, and water. Where do you stand on that discussion? Also, how have the quality standards today been developed? I'm sure there must be many details like German beer purity law that you know and we don't know. At what point in its history do we get this criteria?
How do I feel about the Reinheitsgebot? I think, there were a lot of kind of economic and political reasons why that that law was implemented. There's a long history of that. That's well documented. I think it's in the modern world. I don't think we need a law like that. But I do think that it has had an interesting influence on the development of brewing in Germany. It forced brewers over a long period of time to get really good at using the main ingredients of beer without relying on spices and sugar and other additives. So some of the best, most well-designed beers that you find come from German brewers, and they've gotten really good at using barley and hops and yeast and water. In a modern world, I think beer doesn't need to be limited to just those things. We can make beer with those 4 ingredients, but we can add spices or fruit or use other fermentable sugars or other grains to make some really interesting flavors and some really great beers as well. I don't know if that answers every part of that question.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. It's very fruitful answer. Last week I was in London. I had many meetings with the brewers, pubcos, technical teams, and it's it's really uniqueness and complicated market. Let's ask any question. The answer is yes and no. For example, is there any exclusivity in the market? Yes and no. If bars making their cleaning themselves, yes and no. That kind of market. So it was very informative trip for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, mostly bars making their cleanings themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, maybe you know that. I didn't know this. Could you inform, if you know, could you inform us? Only in Germany, I know, bars should have, let's say, make a notebook to record when the cleaning times. Government has a control about that. In UK,
Okay.
not. In Spain, not. In Israel, not. In Turkey, not. In US, not. Do you have any country more about that?
I don't know much about what other countries regulate regarding line cleaning. My direct experience obviously is here in the US, and our system here is based on individual states. So the states have the control over alcoholic beverage sales and rules in that regard. So there's some general federal guidelines, but the states have control. And in most states, like you said, there are no governing bodies that control how often lines get cleaned. There are a couple of states where the health department will ask you for line cleaning records, and they do have something in the books stating that you have to clean lines every so often. But for the most part, we don't have that here. And I can't really speak to other countries as far as who's doing what where.
Okay, let's bring into a surprise question. Do you think where is the draft beer hub in Europe? Madrid, London, or Berlin?
Wow, that's a tough one. I'd be guessing here. I mean, I'd have to say, Berlin maybe would be a good one. London also pops up as well. Madrid is not a place I think of immediately when I'm thinking of beer.
Madrid is, you can't imagine. Madrid, 2 weeks ago, there was a brewers forum in the Madrid. From all the world, all the beer experts, beer managers was there, and their draft beer quality is increasing day by day. Madrid is going well.
Yeah, and I mean no slight against brewers and beers in Madrid. You know, I'm sure there's some amazing beers and amazing beer culture there. It's just not one that I'm personally familiar with. And you know, the draft beer there, you know, I think that intrigues me the most because there's so much cask ale. Because I'm a big fan of cask conditioned beers.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Okay. Do you think in US, where is the hub? Oregon, Chicago?
For draft beer, you know, I think some of the better beer states, some of the more popular ones that have, you know, that have some of the highest percentage of craft beer sales, you know, some places that pop up immediately would be like Portland, Oregon. I'm thinking of Denver, Colorado. I'm thinking of Chicago is a great beer town. You know, those are some places that pop up right off the top of my head. St. Louis is really great, an excellent beer scene in St. Louis. You know, so I think where you see the best beer scene is oftentimes where you see some of the best draft beer. So I would say any of those cities.
Neil, as I said before the conversation, I will be in Chicago in the second week of August. I hope I will have a chance to drink beer with a Master Cicerone in a Chicago draft beer industry. I hope.
All right. Well, I'll see what I can do. And if it's not me, you know, there's a few other Master Cicerones that live in Chicago. So.
Okay, let's jump into the most exciting part. What is the TapStar certification?
TapStar is a draft beer quality certification program. You know, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong with draft beer at retail, things that retailers have control over. Are the lines being cleaned? Is the beer fresh? Is the glassware clean? Is the system well designed? And TapStar provides a certification for retailers that are doing all the right things to serve a great glass of beer. So it's an auditing and certification system. So if an account wants to be certified, I'll go in and I perform an audit of the system. And there's a number of things they have to be doing correctly. So they can't have any out of code beer on tap. They have to show line cleaning records from the past 2 months that say that that indicate that all their lines have been cleaned every 2 weeks. They have to have a system that is designed correctly, so they can't use any air compressor on their system or any Guinness gas on regularly carbonated beers that make their beer go flat. And they have to have at least one type of glass available that they serve beer in other than the shaker pint. So those are some of the basics. But in addition to that, I also do a cleanliness check of the system. So I do a multi-point inspection on the system to make sure it's clean. I grade that on a sliding scale. I taste a handful of beers to make sure that there's no evidence of any flavor staining from the lines or any indication of line cleaning issues. I check for carbonation and temperature of serving. And I also check the balance of the gas versus the temperature of the beer to make sure that beer carbonation is being kept at in the right range. So beer is being served at the right carbonation level. I also check for glassware cleanliness. So I pick a random glassware and I run them through a couple of different ways of testing whether they're clean or not. So if they pass this audit, then they get a certification. They get a sticker in the window, they get a certificate to hang on the wall, and they get listed on my website at tapstar.org. And then, you know, we promote these accounts through different events.
I have two questions about that. First, how do you measure it regularly?
How do I measure what regularly?
the quality standards in the bars. What is the temperature? What is the carbonation? What is the cleaning? I mean,
Yeah, so I think I understand your question. It's a yearly certification. So I'm in there, I certify an account every year. And then every 6 months in the middle of the year, I check up and make sure they're still kind of doing all the right things. So, that kind of protects the integrity of the program. So we have to have some regular check-ins to make sure that these places are still doing what they were doing when they passed their audit.
okay, if we have a chance to add your greatness and uniqueness know-how to track it in real time, it could be more great, maybe. We'll see. Because it's my second question. We are doing same thing, similar thing in Europe, in more than 30 cities. Pubinno's main value proposition is perfect draft beer. And we put signs on the Pubinno bars. There is a perfect draft beer in here. Then, thanks to my development team, we make a Google Maps. You can find on the cities that use Pubinno technologies the perfect draft beer points, the menu, prices, etc. All the things. And when we started this 3-4 months ago, actually, even though we didn't make a big communication strategy, it started to sense. People are hungry for the quality. But for the enterprise side, for the brewery side, I think they will have some more steps to ready for it. Do you think where this quality stamp vision will go?
Well, my hope is that this can grow into something pretty big. I think you're right. People want quality draft beer, and there are a lot of retailers that get it and they invest money in it, and they do really well because people know that they've got really good draft beer, and I think that this can turn into something pretty big. Right now, it's just in Kansas City. The pandemic kind of hampered my launch, but I'm hoping to relaunch here pretty soon in the way that I originally envisioned. I've been running it at a pretty low level in Kansas City for a couple of years now, and I'm hoping to do a bigger launch in Missouri and maybe even another market or two outside of Missouri. I'm working on some of these things right now to help kind of get that going. And I think if I can work with some of the other industry players to make this work, it can really benefit everybody. It can benefit retailers who will have people returning to drink more beer. It'll help breweries who are sick of going to retail and having their beer taste like garbage. It will help distributors for the same reasons. So sell more beer. It helps the beer business in general. And so, I'm hoping to work with some of the players through state brewers guilds and other entities to try and make this a success.
I hope you will make it industry standard because industry needs it. Neil, as I said to you, I was in London last week. You can't imagine how it's like to drop beer quality in the mainstream bars. It's terrible, really terrible, because the cleaning by themselves and it's a nightmare. But there's a street like called Beer Mile in the South London. All the craft breweries are there, such as Brewdog, Partisan, etc. Perfecto.
Yeah.
So
all of a sudden, it's really good there, huh?
yeah. So industry needs TapStar. I hope our innovations in each side will disrupt the industry because people need great beer.
I agree.
It's the civilization history. Okay, one more long question.
Okay, bring it on.
Ready? Starting is very great. Since World War II. Our drinking habits have drastically changed. Back then, beer drinking was in a home activity and people mostly consumed can or bottled beer. As time passed and technology evolved in recent decades, draft beer got popular again. However, by the way, in last 20 years, draft beer decreased around 60%, something like that, in all over the world. However, I believe we are at another breaking point of the draft beer industry with the 21st century technologies. I'm curious about your predictions about industry. Do you think that technology can help standardize the draft beer quality? How do you see the developments in the future?
Well, so I think, I'll say this, that draft beer is one of the unique things that beer has to offer. You don't really see this in other beverage alcohol. The ability to serve from a large container. It's generally considered to be fresher than in a bottle. You have less surface area of the container in contact with the liquid. You have one of the most sustainable packages out there. I mean, you can tell me a more sustainable package than the stainless steel keg. They're outside of the dust cover and the collar. Everything else is completely reusable. There's nothing that really gets thrown away. So it's returnable and reusable over and over and over again. It's a unique value proposition for a retailer to be able to give somebody a sample. It's a unique opportunity for sampling for the consumer where they can drink one of them without having to commit to buying a 6-pack or a larger package. So it's something unique that that beer has to offer offer retailers and consumers. So I don't see it going away anytime soon. And I think there's some waxing and waning of popularity of it. And I think, we've seen a little bit of a downswing because of the pandemic right now, of course, because a lot of people are drinking at home, and when, bars and restaurants were shut down, of course, the draft beer took a really big hit. But I don't see draft beer going away. But I think one of the things that is important to making sure that it does stick around and that it does remain profitable is maintaining quality. So draft beer has always been associated with quality, but that's not always a given moving forward, because there are a lot of things that we talked about that can go wrong with beer that's poured through a draft system. And as long as we're staying on top of that, and we're ensuring that everybody who is pouring draft beer is pouring it in the best possible way, I think it's going to stick around for a long time.
Neil, can we say that, it's kind of a sensitive question, can we say that we see the worst time of the draft beer in a century? Because even in a nuclear war, some draft beer should be there, but in pandemic, draft beer.
Yeah, you tell me another time in history where draft beer went away completely for months. I mean, it was it was pretty devastating. I felt it firsthand. I mean, I have a draft services business, and then I saw the results of that when things came back, because a lot of people didn't take care of their systems. They just shut them down, and then they started them back up and expected everything to taste fine and work fine, and it didn't. So there were a lot of quality issues out there. There was a lot of out-of-code beer. There were a lot of dirty draft systems. So that, there were a lot of messes to clean up there for a while. So it was some pretty dark days for draft beer. But things are encouraging. Draft beer is coming back. It's not fully back, but it is largely back. I think some of the problems that draft beer is facing right now are directly related to problems at retail. We don't fully have a confident retail sector just yet. I think that's going to take a little while. I think maybe we need to go through another winter without a major COVID crisis before retailers can be fully confident in things moving forward, and then maybe we'll see draft beer start to grow along with the on-premise retail business.
Yes, you're right. You're totally right. Price to draft beer is here, still with us. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
If somebody asks me this question, my answer is every time is different. Depends on the situation. Personally, what is your favorite draft beer? Favorite beer?
Favorite beer? Oh, I get this one a lot. My answer is my standard answer is Duvel. I love Duvel.
Well,
Yeah.
oh.
So I actually ended up,
you are the devil.
Boulevard, the company I worked for, got purchased by Duvel while I was working there. So I actually worked for Duvel for about 3 years. And it was one of my favorite beers before. It's still one of my favorite beers now. And the full strength Duvel for a long time was only available in the bottle. But they're starting to put some very special design draft systems around where they're pouring full strength, fully carbonated Duvel on draft, which is really nice. I love that.
Remind me a great memory. Let me share it.
Yeah.
When you say do that. When we start Pubinno first, it was 7-8 years ago. Our first product was Beer Point. It's like a vending machine for draft beer. Okay. Mm-hmm. And every machine has different designs, especially, different colors, different paintings. And in that time, we were working with one of the coolest guy in the city who make colors in the walls. I don't remember the name. Banksy.
Oh yeah, does murals.
Yeah. So then one day we went to a bar, and he was painting the bar's wall, okay, about the Duvel's logo. He doesn't speak English. Then after some hours, he learns the Duvel's meaning, about the hell, about the devil, etc. Suddenly he put off the colors, paintings. He said, "I'm giving up. I couldn't do that." Blah blah. Then we have a great relation with him, and I started to talk with him to calm down. And I said to him, "Hey, my personal ID, government ID, starts with 666. By the way, it's real. Yeah, come on, you can do that. This is your personal choice." Then fortunately I persuaded him, and he started to keep on to finishing the painting. This is my memory for the Duvel.
That's great.
All right, yeah, Neil, thanks for being with us tonight. This is great episode of the Perfect Beer Talks. I hope to meet you in person. And before finishing, we will get questions from our audience and a small Q&A session, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let's start the Q&A session. All right. David Jones says that, what do you think about very trendy things like non-alcoholic beer? It seems like everyone is crazy about that in recent months. David Jones.
I have no problem with non-alcoholic beer. If you want to drink a beer that has no alcohol in it, that's just fine. I like drinking low alcohol beer. I really like sessionable beers that are like I love like a 3.5% English bitter or something like that. So I get it if somebody wants to drink a beer that's lower in alcohol or has no alcohol. I will say this about, since we're talking about draft beers, I'm very wary of non-alcoholic beer on draft, because when you take the alcohol out of the beer, you're taking away one of the biggest protections against pathogens in beer. So now, instead of having a relatively safe beverage that pathogens don't grow in, there's a potential for now you have more food safety concerns about non-alcoholic beer on draft than you did before. So I'll say that.
I see. Another question from Nora Vanderhorst. I think she's from Heineken land. And she asks, what do you think about in home brewing? I tried to experiment with that a little bit, but the outcome wasn't satisfying at all. Do you have any advice? She asked.
Well, you know, it depends. I guess it depends on what your standards are for a good beer, and I don't know what you did when you were home brewing, but I know there are a lot of people who get a lot of satisfaction from making beer at home, and I've had some really amazing home brews. I've had some really bad home brews too, but the same goes for commercial beers. If you tried it and you didn't think it was worth the effort, then maybe you're better off just buying your beer at the store. But I know there are a lot of people who can make some pretty good beer at home fairly easily and get a lot of satisfaction from it.
Okay, last question from Thomas Rehling. It's kind of a magazinal question. I want to learn more about beer and food pairings. Do you have any recommendations? As far as I know, the Master Cicerone certification requires pairings to be implemented and presented. What was yours? Thanks in advance, she asked. Yes.
Yeah, so there's a number of books out there that are really good beer and food books. I'm trying to see if I've got one on my shelf here right now. One that comes to mind is a classic one that's been out there for a long time. It's called The Brewmaster's Table. It's by Garrett Oliver. We have used that as a resource for people studying for Cicerone exams for many years. The Brewers Association has a beer and food course on their website that you can register for. So if you go to the American Brewers Association website, they've got a great course that teaches you the basics about pairing beer and food. And the best thing that you can do is you can drink beer and eat food and think about what works and what doesn't. So next meal, sit down and pick a beer that you think might go with it and try it out. And that's how you learn things. You just start drinking beer with your meals.
All right. I hope we will have a great pairs with you with the great draft beers in Chicago soon. Neil, appreciate it. Thanks for your time. It was a great session. And
thank you very much.
For our audience, thanks for your listening and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.